Howdy, my fellow gamers, and welcome back to another episode of Storytime with Freak as we continue our journey through this pollen-infested world that gave us the toll. We still have about 200 pages left in the book, so I do want to try to get these out faster. I know I say that every single episode, so just bear with me, and I appreciate your patience. Without further ado, Chapter 36. We are bitterly opposed. 8 of us firmly believe that an association of humans should be responsible for the thinning of the burgeoning population, but the 4 against it are adamant in their resistance. Confucius, Elizabeth, Sappho, and the king insist that we are simply not ready for such a responsibility any more than we are ready for immortality. But the alternative they propose terrifies me, for if we implement their plan, it will be a genie out of the bottle, out of our control forever. I therefore stand with Prometheus and the others. We must establish an honorable worldwide society of deathmongers. We shall call ourselves Scythes and create a global Scythedom. The sentient cloud, which will have nothing to do with issues of life or death, supports it, and people will come to see the wisdom of it in time. As for the 4 dissenters among us, they will have to accept the voice of the majority, so we present a unified front to the world. Still, I wonder which is worse, to mimic nature in its cruel brutality, or take it upon ourselves, imperfect as we are, to insert into death the kindness and compassion that nature lacks. The 4 in opposition argue for nature as a model, but I cannot advocate for it, not while I still have a conscience, from the lost pages of founding Scythe Da Vinci. Chapter 36, Who Do You Serve? Although the Thunderhead had predicted it, Grayson didn't need the Thunderhead to tell him that the first repercussions from the mile-high gleaning would be from sibilant Tonists. The only question was, where would it happen? Would it be against Goddard directly, or would it be somewhere less prepared for an onslaught of violent zealots? He had his first answer when he saw the first images of the burned ruins of the sub-Saharan palace. Violence begets violence, Curate Mendoza commented. This clearly falls for a change in our approach, don't you agree? Grayson couldn't help but feel that he had failed. For over 2 years he had been wrestling sibilants into line, getting them to shed their extreme ways, but he had never made it to Sub-Sahara. This might not have happened if he had done a better job. Well, said Mendoza, if we had our own personal mode of transportation, we could have moved more quickly, tackled more problems in more regions. Fine, Grayson said. You win. Get us a jet, fly us to Sub-Sahara. I want to find these Tonists before they make things even worse. As it turned out, that was the only way for them to get into the region. After the attack, the sub-Saharan Scythedom clamped down, extending way beyond its authority, and turned into the region of something of a Mortal Age police state. If the Thunderhead will not do its job and apprehend these criminals, then it falls upon the Scythes of Sub-Sahara to take control, they proclaimed. And since Scythes, by law, could do anything they wanted, they couldn't be stopped from taking control, enforcing curfews and gleaning anyone who resisted. Tonists were officially forbidden from traveling to Sub-Sahara, and all commercial flights were monitored by the Scythedom in a way that hadn't been monitored since mortal days. The tragedy of all this was that the Sub-Saharan Scythedom had been a gentle and tolerant region, but now, thanks to the sibilants, it was aligning with Goddard, who promised worldwide retribution against Tonists. There was no question the new Sub-Saharan High Blade, whoever it would be, would have a robe that sparkled with jewels. The Sub-Saharan Scythedom had dispatched dozens of regiments of the Blade Guard to patrol the streets of Port Remembrance and every other city in the region, as well as beating paths through the wilderness in search of the Tonists who had murdered their High Blade. But they had no luck. No one knew where the sibilants were hiding. But the Thunderhead did. And contrary to popular opinion, the Thunderhead was not shirking its responsibility to bring justice. It was merely going about it a different way, by means of a luxury jet with vertical landing capability. I could get used to this, Morrison commented as he luxuriated in a plush seat. Don't, said Grayson, although he suspected that once you began traveling in such a craft, you couldn't easily part with it. There were 4 passengers and not a pilot among them. That was fine. The Thunderhead knew exactly where to take them. You could say we're being moved by the Holy Triad, Sister Astrid said. Actually, no, said Morrison, because I only count 2 of the 3. The Toll, he gestured to Grayson, and the Thunder, he indicated to the automated cockpit. There's no tone. Ha! You're wrong, said Astrid with a grin. Don't you hear it, singing in the hum of the engines? There was, at the very least, a sense that they were soaring toward not just a destination, but a destiny. I am Curate Mendoza, humble servant to his sonority, the Toll, who you now see before you, the Tone made flesh. All rejoice, echoed Astrid and Morrison. Grayson knew it would have been more impressive, of course, if the Toll's entourage had been larger. Don't know why I struggled to read that line, I'm sorry. Their jet had dropped down from the sky and landed with impressive gravity in front of the Objunk Caves, in what was once eastern Nigeria, but was now just part of the sub-Saharan region. The caves and the surrounding forests were maintained by the Thunderhead as a curated wilderness, everything within it protected. Everything, that is, except for the sibilants hiding in its twisted passageways of the mysterious caves. It was once said that the stones of the Objunk Caves, an odd choice for a sect of Tonists who were mute. When Grayson and his team arrived, the sibilants were nowhere to be seen. They were hiding deep in the caves and probably went deeper the moment they heard the roar of the aircraft. But the thunderhead smoked them out, so to speak, by emitting a sonar tone that disoriented the many thousands of bats also living in the cave, making them go, well, bat shit. Attacked by the peeved bats, the Tonists were chased out, where they were faced not by a phalanx of blade guards, as they had expected, but by 4 figures, one of whom was dressed in rich violet, under a flowing scapular down which sound waves spilled like a waterfall. Between the jet on their doorstep and the somber figure in holy attire, it was hard not to pay attention. "Where is your curate?" Mendoza asked. The Tonist stood there in defiance. The Toll was dead. The Toll was a martyr. How dare this impostor taint the Toll's memory? It was always this way with sibilants. "It will be better for you if you honor the Toll and bring your leader forth," Mendoza said. Still nothing, so Grayson quietly asked the Thunderhead for just a little more assistance, and the Thunderhead was happy to oblige, speaking gently in Grayson's ear. Grayson moved toward one of the Tonists. She was a small woman who seemed half-starved, and he wondered if starvation was part of the sibilant sect's behavior. Her defiance wavered as he approached. She was afraid of him. Good, he thought. After what these people had done, she should be. He leaned close to her, and she stiffened. Then he whispered into her ear, "Your brother did it. Everyone thinks it was you, but it was your brother." Grayson had no idea what it was that her brother had done, but the Thunderhead did, and told Grayson just enough to bring about the desired reaction. The woman's eyes widened, her lips began to quiver, she let off the slightest squeak of surprise. She was now speechless in more ways than one. "Now bring me your curate." She did not resist in the slightest now. She turned and pointed to one of the others in the crowd. Grayson already knew, of course. The Thunderhead had identified him the moment they all came out of the cave. But it was important that the man be betrayed by one of his own. Exposed, the man stepped forward. He was the epitome of a sibilant curate. Scraggly gray beard, wild eyes, scars on his arm from some sort of self-inflicted misery. Grayson would have been able to pick him out even if he hadn't been told. "Are you the Tonists who burned the High Blade Ten Kamenin and Scythes Makeda and Baba?" There were silent sects that used sign language to communicate, but this group had nothing but the simplest of gestures, as if communication itself was their enemy. A single nod from the curate. "Do you believe that I am the Toll?" Nothing from their curate. Grayson tried again, a bit louder, speaking from deep in his diaphragm. "I asked you a question. Do you believe I am the Toll?" The sibilants all turned to the curate to see what he would do. The curate narrowed his eyes and shook his head slowly, and so Grayson got to work. He turned his eyes to various members of the curate's flock, singling them out. "Barton Hunt," he said, "your mother's been sending you letters for 6 years, 3 months, and 5 days, but you return each one unopened." Then he turned to another. "Aranza Manga, you once secretly told the Thunderhead that you wanted to be supplanted with the memories of your best friend, who had been gleaned, but of course the Thunderhead wouldn't do such a thing." By the time he turned to a third, both Barton and Aranza were in tears. They fell to their knees, gripping the hem of his garment. They believed. Then, when Grayson looked around for a third, everyone braced as if about to be hit by some devastating blow. "Zoran Sarabi," Grayson called out. Said the man, shaking his head. Then he knelt in obeisance before the Toll could even speak, terrified of what truth might be told. Finally, Grayson turned to their curate. "And you," he said, unable to hide his disgust, "Rupert Rosewood, you demanded that all your followers feel the pain of their muteness you forced upon them, but you never felt that pain yourself. You had your tongue removed under anesthesia because you were too much of a coward to live by your own warped convictions." And although the man was horrified at being exposed, he did not yield. He only grew red with anger. Grayson took a deep breath and dug down to find his deepest, most resonant voice. "I am the Toll, the Tone made flesh. I alone hear the thunder. This man you call curate is not worthy of the title. He's a traitor to all you believe in, and he has misled you, defiled you. He is false. I am true. So tell me now, who do you serve?" And then he took a deep breath and said one more time with a voice that could make mountains bow, "Who do you serve?" And one by one, they all knelt before the Toll, lowering their heads in supplication, some even prostrating themselves on the forest floor. All of them but one. Their curate, who was now quaking with fury. He opened his hollow mouth to intone, but it was a weak, miserable, pathetic sound. He was alone. No one joined him. Still he continued until his breath failed him. And when silence fell, Grayson turned to Mendoza, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear what came next to them. "You will inject them all with fresh nanites, so that their tongues may grow back, and this reign of terror can end." "Yes, your sonority," said Mendoza. Then Grayson approached the curate. He thought the man might strike out at him. Grayson almost hoped that he would. But he didn't. "You're done," Grayson said in disgust. Then he turned to Scythe Morrison and said 2 simple words that he never thought he'd hear himself say. "Glean him." Without hesitation, Scythe Morrison grabbed the curate with both hands, turned his head one way, his body another, and executed him. Tell me I was wrong. Grayson paced the tent they had set up for him in the forest, unsettled in a way he had never been unsettled before. Why should I tell you that? The Thunderhead asked, calm as calm could be. Because it was wrong to order that man gleaned. I need to know. Was it wrong? Grayson could still hear the sound of the man's neck snapping. It was the most horrible thing that he had ever heard. And yet, he liked it. Seeing that monstrous curate die was far too satisfying for comfort. Is this what those New Order scythes felt? A primal predatory lust for the crushing of life? He wanted no part of that feeling, yet here it was. I cannot speak on the subject of death. It is not my domain, and you know this, Grayson. I don't care. You're being rather irrational. You can't say anything about death, but I know you can talk to me about right and wrong. So, was it wrong to have given Morrison that order? Only you can know that. You're supposed to be directing me, helping me to help you make a better world. And you are, said the Thunderhead. But you're not infallible. Only I am infallible. So, if you're asking me if it's possible for you to make errors in judgment, the answer is yes. You make errors all the time, as does every other human being who has ever lived. Error is an intrinsic part of the human condition, and it is something I deeply love about humankind. You're not helping me. I charged you with unifying Tonists so that they could be more useful to the world. I can only speak to your progress in the task, not judge your methodology. Enough. Grayson ripped his earpiece off. He was about to throw it in anger, but then he heard a voice, faint and tiny, the Thunderhead's voice still speaking through it. You are a terrible person, the Thunderhead said. You are a wonderful person. Well, which is it? Grayson demanded. And the response, as faint as could be, came back to him. Not an answer, but as another question. Why can't you see that the answer is both? That evening, Grayson put back on his vestments and prepared to address the Tonists, to grant them forgiveness. He had done this many times before, but no sibilant Tonisty face had ever done something as heinous as these. I don't want to forgive them, he told Mendoza before he went out. Granting them absolution brings them into the fold, Mendoza said. It serves our needs, and besides, he added, it's not Grayson Tolliver forgiving them, it's the toll, which means your personal feelings shouldn't even come to play. When Grayson put his earpiece back in, he asked the Thunderhead if Mendoza was right. Did it want Grayson to forgive them? Or more to the point, did the Thunderhead forgive them? Was it so magnanimous that it could even excuse their curate? Ah, the Thunderhead said sadly. That poor man. Poor man? That monster doesn't deserve your sympathy. You didn't know him as I did. As with all others, I watched him from birth. I saw the forces in his life that shaped him, turning him into the bitter, misguided, self-righteous man he became. Thus, I mourn his gleaning just as I mourn all others. I can never be as forgiving as you, Grayson said. You misunderstand. I don't forgive him. I merely understand him. Well then, Grayson said, still a bit belligerent from the earlier conversation, you're not a god, are you? Because a god forgives. I never claimed to be a god, the Thunderhead responded. I am merely godlike. The Tonists were waiting for the toll when he came out. They had been waiting for hours. They probably would have waited through the night. Don't try to speak, he told them when he saw them attempting to greet them. Your tongues have no muscle memory. It will take some time until you teach yourselves to speak again. By the way they looked at him with awe and reverence, he knew that their violent deeds were behind them. They were no longer sibilant, and when the toll forgave them, they cried tears of true remorse for what they had done, and tears of pure joy at having been given a second chance. Now they would follow the toll wherever he led, and a good thing too, because as it would turn out, he'd need to lead them into darkness before he could lead them into light. That was chapter 36. Let's see how long chapter 37 is. Alright, we'll go ahead and do chapter 37 as well. We have now laid the groundwork for scythedoms in each of the world's regions, all reporting to us so that we may maintain order and consistency of vision. We have even begun plans for a city that exists separate and apart from any region, so we may maintain impartiality. Prometheus is now Supreme Blade, and there's talk of Grand Slayers to represent each continent. Oh, but we've gotten full of ourselves. Secretly, I hope our tenure as the arbiters of death is brief, and that we are quickly deemed obsolete. The Cloud has announced plans for a lunar colony, the first step toward expanding our footprint in the universe. If successful, it will provide far better population control than we Scythes can provide. I, for one, would much rather live in a world where the surplus population can leave, rather than being denied its very existence. The question remains, however, can we trust artificial intelligence with our future? Although I do have my concerns, I believe we can. The few remaining world leaders do nothing but malign the sentient cloud. In fact, they've begun calling it a thunderhead, as if rebranding it as a threatening storm will turn people against it. In the end, they will fail, because their time is through. Whatever they choose to call it, the cloud's benevolence speaks louder than the words of petty politicians and tyrants. From the lost pages of founding Scythe Da Vinci. Chapter 37. Nothing good about it. When Jericho Soberanus awoke from revival, Scythe Anastasia was in a chair beside the bed, sleeping with her knees hooked up to her chest. Fetal position, thought Jerry. No, more like a protective stance, like a tortoise in its shell. Did she feel so threatened that she needed to contract herself when she slept on guard, even when unconscious? Well, if so, she had a good reason to feel that way. She was dressed simply now. Jeans, a white blouse. She wasn't even wearing the ring. Nothing about her to indicate that she was a Scythe. She appeared so modest for someone so much larger than life. To be larger than life was fine for the dead, but they didn't have to deal with the consequences. But for someone returned to life, it must leave one in a state of shock, too strange to measure. Jerry looked around at the gentle colors and easy nature of the room. This was, of course, a revival center. The fact that they were here meant that Jerry's death had successfully attracted an ambidrone. Had Anastasia been here in the room for Jerry's entire revival, keeping vigil? So glad you're awake, said a revival nurse, stepping into the room and raising a curtain to reveal that was either a sunset or a sunrise, then checking Jerry's chart. I'm most pleased to make your acquaintance. Citra had been dreaming of flying, not all that far from reality either. She had clung to Jerry's arm as the ambidrone soared with them across the city, struggling to maintain flight with the added weight. She was sure she must have dislocated Jerry's shoulder, but such things didn't matter when you were dead. Any damage done would be healed before the captain awoke. In Citra's dream, Jerry's arm became suddenly covered in grease and she slipped, but didn't fall. Instead, she flew on her own. The problem was that she couldn't stop or control her direction. Soon, she was out over the bay and beyond, heading west across the Atlantic toward the distant Americas. She had no idea what awaited there, but she did know it would be in the realm of nightmares. And so she was grateful to be stirred awake by the revival nurse's gentle voice. She uncurled from her chair and stretched out the kink in her neck. Jerry was alive again and much more alert than she. Good morning, Citra said groggily, then realized it sounded far too weak for a Scythe, even one who was currently incognito. She cleared her throat and spoke with more confidence. Good morning, Anastasia said. Nothing good about it, I'm afraid, said the nurse. I've never seen so many blade guards roaming the streets. The Scythedom is still looking for those terrible Tonists who ended their hide blade, but they're long gone, off to wherever it is that people like that hide. Anastasia closed her eyes as the terror of that night came back to her. So many people had lost their lives, and although some were revived, there simply weren't enough ambidrones to save everyone. Sibilants must have thrown dozens, maybe hundreds into the fire, and just as they had a plan of attack, they must have had a plan for escape. The nurse explained that in the day and a half since the ambidrone had left them here, Port Remembrance had been put on complete lockdown. The situation in North America was probably even worse. What Goddard had done in that stadium was beyond a line in the sand. It was a fissure. Either you embraced his way, or you ran from it. There were plenty of people doing both. Anastasia knew she might be recognized. Now that she had gone public and people knew she was alive, it would be much harder to hide. Seeing as you're awake, I'm sure there will be Scythes in to see you, the nurse told Jerry. Not to worry. They're not here to glean, just to question. You both worked at the palace, didn't you? They want to question everyone who was there. Jerry glanced at Anastasia as she put a comforting hand on his shoulder she had dislocated not so long ago. Right, said Jerry. Well, I suppose we're looking for new jobs. Oh, don't concern yourselves with that. The Thunderhead might not be talking these days, but it still puts up the job listings. If you want work again, there's plenty to be had. After she left, Jerry raised the head of the revival bed a bit higher and smiled at Anastasia. So what was it like riding in the back of an ambidrone? It wasn't like that, Anastasia said, but she chose to spare Jerry the details. I never got to thank you for what you did. I just did my job, Jerry said. Your job is to be a salvage captain, not this. And didn't I salvage the unsalvageable situation? Yeah, you did, Anastasia told Jerry with a smile. Now we have to salvage this one and get out of here before someone comes in to question us. But no sooner had she said it when the door swung open. It wasn't a Scythe. Anastasia's heart seized for a moment until she realized who it was. Forest green robe, concerned expression. My relief at seeing both of you can only be matched by my fear that someone else might, Scythe Pasuelo said. No time for greetings. The sub-Saharan Scythes are already questioning why I'm here. I haven't been recognized yet. Of course you have, Pasuelo said. I'm sure the nursing staff here is all secretly at Twitter about it, but luckily none of them have reported you, or you would already be on your way to Goddard. I'm here to escort you to a place of greater safety, where you can continue your broadcasts. More and more people are listening, Anastasia, and they're finding the things you've been leading them to. Goddard is threatening to glean anyone caught poking in the back brain, but that's not stopping people. He couldn't enforce it anyways, Anastasia pointed out. The back brain is out of the Scythe's jurisdiction. It reminded Anastasia how much digging she still had left to do. So what place of safety do you propose, Jerry asked. Is there such a place anymore? Who can say, Pasuelo said. Safe places are dwindling just as quickly as enemies mount. He paused, considering something. There are rumors of a place so out of sight not even the most well-traveled Scythes know of it. Sounds more like wishful thinking, Jerry said. Where did you hear of this? Pasuelo offered an apologetic shrug. Rumors are like rain through an old roof. The efforts of finding the source is greater than the cost of a new roof. Then he paused again. There's another rumor, though, that it might be more useful to us. This one's about the toll, the Tonist's so-called profit. Tonists, thought Anastasia. Just the mention of them brought her to the edge of fury. There's no proof that the toll ever even existed, Jerry pointed out. He could just be another lie the sibilants use to justify the things they do. I believe he existed, Pasuelo said. There's evidence to suggest that he still does, and that he's been standing against the sibilant sects. We have such a sect in Amazonia who swore he visited them and turned them from their violent ways. If it's true, he might be a worthwhile ally to have. Well, whoever it is, he said, Anastasia, he's got a lot of explaining to do. Ezra Van Otterloo didn't dress like a tonist. He didn't quote platitudes. He didn't insist on traveling in groups of 7 or 12, and he definitely did not intone. He did go by Brother Ezra, however. That was the only concession he made to his calling. It was his audience with the toll over 2 years ago that brought him into the fold, giving him his purpose and setting him on his path. Whether or not the toll was divine didn't matter to Ezra. All that mattered was that the Thunderhead still spoke to him, and that made him worthy of being followed. Ezra traveled the world, painting whatever he wanted, wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted, just as the toll said he should do, throwing up guerrilla murals everywhere he went, and just as the toll promised, he found his bliss. He had to be quick, he had to be quiet, and in all that time, he had never been caught. He would travel the world telling local Tonists wherever he went that he was on a mission from the toll, and they would give him food and shelter. But then he started running into Tonists who claimed that the toll had appeared to them after he was gleaned. They told him how they'd been sibilant, but the toll reformed them. Ezra didn't believe it at first, but still he'd listen to their testimony. Then, during the night, he'd paint a scene of the toll's visitation somewhere in the city in some place where no such painting was supposed to be. After the third set of reformed sibilants he came across, he realized that there had to be some truth to it, so he began to seek out more such encounters. He tracked down groups known to be the worst of the worst to see if they'd also been reformed. About half of them had, and the other half he imagined were probably on the toll's list. Then, one day he showed up at an airport, uncertain of where to go next, and lo and behold, a ticket was already in the system for him. The Thunderhead had taken over his travel, sending him to sects the toll had reformed, so he could visit them and leave behind a mural of the honor of the toll. That's how Ezra knew he was a part of the toll's entourage, part of his story, even if the toll didn't know it. Then, when he was caught in Amazonia, he had to believe it was also part of the Thunderhead's plan. But on the other hand, if it was just bad luck, the Thunderhead had ways of using that to its advantage as well. While the entire sub-Saharan Scythedom was searching for the sibilants who had killed their High Blade, it was an Amazonian Scythe who knew where they were, thanks to a single Tonist in Scythe Pasuelo's custody. We caught him painting a scene of the toll turning into a flock of birds on the wall of our High Blade's residence, Scythe Pasuelo told Anastasia. It's what I do, Ezra said it with a smile. They were all safely aboard Pasuelo's plane. Pasuelo had even brought a brand new turquoise robe for Anastasia. It felt good to be clothed as herself again. Punishment for defacing Scythe property is gleaning, Pasuelo said, but Highblade Tarillos didn't have the heart to glean an artist. Then he told us what he'd been doing. I could paint you, Scythe Anastasia, he offered. It won't be as good as a mortal artist, of course, I've come to accept that, but I'm less mediocre than most. Save your brushes, she told him. Perhaps it was vanity on her part, but the last thing she wanted was to be immortalized by an artist who was less mediocre than most. He's been in our custody for several months, but then 2 tickets appeared for him on the global travel system after Ten Kaminan was killed, Pasuelo told her. One to Anastasia, a small sub-Saharan city, but the second one was baffling. It was a tour ticket to a protected wilderness where there couldn't have been tours for over 100 years. The Yoganbanite caves. To that, Ezra shrugged and smiled. I'm special. Sure you don't want a portrait? The fact that the ticket showed up in the system after Ezra was in Scythe custody could really only mean one thing. The Thunderhead wanted the Amazonian Scythedom to know where the sibilants and the toll were. Normally it would be a short flight, Pasuelo told Anastasia, but we'll have to take a roundabout route, engaging first in some bogus business elsewhere, otherwise we might inadvertently lead the sub-Saharan Scythes right to the toll. That's all right, Anastasia told him. I need time to dig into the backbrain again for my next broadcast. I'm close to something on the Mars disaster. In the orbital colony, Pasuelo said. Anastasia sighed and shook her head. One catastrophe at a time. And that is the end of Chapter 37. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode of Storytime with Freak. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, all that good jazz. Only about 28% of you are subscribed. We're almost close to 1,000 subs. We're making progress. Check out all the other gaming content that we post. We post almost a video a day, sometimes every 2 to 3 days. You know, life is hard. Hope you guys are all staying safe and healthy in Corona. Today's conversational topic will be, I don't know, what are your thoughts on VR gaming, virtual reality, the Oculus, Rift, all that good jazz, PlayStation VR. Very curious to hear what you guys think about that. So let us know in the comment section, and don't forget to check out the links down below. Join the community, join the circus, check out the Twitch, Twitter, merch, all that good jazz, and as always, stay freaky.